Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and guys, first of all, this is our Halloween edition of Goal Line Hockey, so you know what that means. We gotta throw on some different colors. We got, a little bit scary. We got the red. We're gonna throw a little bit of orange in there, so it's a little bit of a spooky environment here for this weekend. A lot of hockey going on this weekend, but going into this weekend, week 2 of Goal Line Hockey Power Rankings. Every weekend, it's usually going to be on a Saturday, but this week we got lucky. It's a Friday night Goal Line Hockey Power Rankings. So we had a decent amount of movement this week, and we're going to be going over some of those teams. So with that said, let's get right into it. So we're going to start off with the bottom, as we normally do here in these Power Rankings. At number 32, it's the Arizona Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes have really struggled to start this season. They have yet to get a win yet this season. One of only 2 teams to have that feat at this point. Every other team besides 30 teams have won at least one game. There are 2 that still are without a win this season. The Coyotes are one of them. It's going to be a rough year for the Coyotes. We kind of figured that, but it's been a really rough start for them. And listen, they don't have the tire fire of the team in front of them, but this is a team, we all knew what was going to happen. It's just now we're seeing it kind of take full form, and they start the season in the first 7 games. They are officially winless after 7 games. But again, some of the hockey they've played under Andre Tourigny, Tourigny, they've actually played some decent games. They just haven't been able to get the result, and that's really what it comes down to for the Yotes. Looking at the Chicago Blackhawks, they are yet to win a game yet. 7 games into the season. They play the Blues tonight. That's going to be a big matchup for them. With that said, though, this is a Blackhawks team. They got a lot of off-ice distractions right now that are bothering them and kind of plaguing them. As much as they're going to tell you, it's not a distraction for them or this or that, it absolutely is ever since the beginning of this season. And you're just hoping by the end of the month, going into November, maybe they could start to change the tide a little bit, get a win or 2 under their belt, and kind of build a little bit of confidence. Just like the Coyotes, first 7 games, held to a goose egg in the win column. Now at number 30, we have the Anaheim Ducks. I was pretty excited with the Ducks after the first 2 games of the season, really the first 3 or 4. Ever since that win in Calgary, a game they kind of stole from the Flames, who are a great hockey team. We'll talk about them in a little bit from now. But they have been really good this season, and the Ducks were able to win that game, Jamie Drysdale. And since then, they're on a 5-game losing streak since that win up in Alberta. This is the Ducks team. We knew there was going to be some growing pains. You can tell there is some visible frustration there. They lost last night to the Buffalo Sabres in overtime. You were hoping you were going to pull that one out. They could not do that. But a couple of big games here for the Ducks. They're just going to have to kind of grind it out. It's one of those things. But, man, not a great start for the Ducks. And just how this season has turned around after the first 3 games, things have not looked so great since then. At number 29, this is kind of disappointing as well. They also looked good in the beginning of the season. I'm talking about the Los Angeles Kings. They have lost 6 in a row now. They have really dropped from where they started the season. I was talking about this could be a big year for the Kings. You had Doughty scoring goals, Brown, Kopitar getting on the board. Deneau scored in his first game as a Los Angeles King. Cal Peterson looked good. But now we started to see some pretty critical injuries on that right side defense. Sean Walker out for the season for the Los Angeles Kings, and Drew Doughty out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. He's going to be out for probably 2 months. So that's just a really tough loss. Probably won't see him till the beginning of 2022 in January. So there is definitely a couple of holes on their depth. And this is going to be a problem for the Los Angeles Kings. And quickly, just like that, they find themselves with the Anaheim Ducks right at the bottom. A team I had toward the middle of the pack just last week. We are seeing this team is truly just not that great right now. And I had to drop them. With that said, at number 28, Since we were last here last week, the Montreal Canadiens have won 2 hockey games. This is some good stuff for the Montreal Canadiens. Won 2 of their past 3 games. That West Coast road trip maybe gave them a little bit of energy and invigorated a little bit of confidence in this team. And boy, did they need it. And I think getting away from the the off-ice stuff with Bergevin and all the injury stuff, getting out of Montreal was the best thing for the Habs. We're seeing that take form right now. They're proving it right now. So some great stuff from the Habs. I'm hoping that continues. At number 27, guys, we got the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators have lost 3 games in a row. They have not been their best self. Brady Tkachuk back in the lineup, but we're not seeing enough from the Senators. This is a team that goaltending has been a little bit of a struggle. Top-end goal scorers not getting it done completely for them quite yet. So this is a team that's still growing. But again, in that Atlantic Division, you don't really have time to grow. This division is hot and fast. And if you don't have time, you don't really have time to just kind of wean your way into this season. I think the Senators will put together a pretty good campaign this year. But as of right now, I do have them toward the bottom half of my power rankings. At number 26, just like the Montreal Canadiens, hey, look at that. The Seattle Kraken have now won 2 straight since I last saw you guys. So the Kraken starting to put things together a little bit at home, the opposite of the Habs. Sometimes, the road trip can be the worst thing for you. It could be the best thing for you. Vice versa for home ice as well. So I think Seattle needed to come home, have that home ice advantage. And they seem to be doing a little bit better. Like I said, 2 straight wins for the Kraken, kind of working their way up the ladder again. But again, they've dug themselves a pretty big hole. The good thing is, we already talked about 2 teams in that division. You already have the 2, that Los Angeles area teams. You have the Ducks and the Kings, who are both behind you in the Pacific Division. So definitely something to improve on for the Kraken, and they could definitely move up as soon as next week if they keep going the way they are. Moving up, moving down this week at number 25, we've got the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Vancouver Canucks are a team I was expecting to be maybe a little bit higher, but, in my preseason rankings for the Pacific, I did have the Canucks toward the bottom and missing the playoffs. And I had Seattle and Vancouver being pretty close to each other. So we're seeing that right now in week 2. That is showing up. This is a team that, if Thatcher Demko doesn't play like the Thatcher Demko we saw in the 2020 bubble series, playoff series where they went to the Western Conference Final, Game 7 against Dallas, if we don't see that Thatcher Demko, this could be a long season for the Canucks. Definitely some interesting things with their blue line. Saw Luke Shen get in a fight the other night. He's trying to get his, keep himself in the lineup for the Canucks. This has been a rough start for this team. Brock Besser didn't start this season. He started, a couple days late. This is a team that needs to find ways to win, and they're just not able to do that right now. And it does come back to goaltending. Halak didn't look great the other night either. But this is something that you can still improve upon in that Pacific Division. But you only have so much time. And, as we're seeing, who we just talked about, Seattle kind of working their way up. Maybe you have one of those teams, Anaheim or the LA Kings move up. That could make for a pretty precarious situation for the Vancouver Canucks, who could easily find themselves at the bottom of the division within the next 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens there. But there's definitely room for improvement. At number 24, guys, the Toronto Maple Leafs, really, they should be lower. But I look at that roster and I keep telling myself, how is this team not higher in the standings? This is a team that, they kind of limped their way through the first couple games of the year. We know how bad Montreal was, so that didn't really mean much when they won those games. Ottawa wasn't a great team. They already played them twice, and they split those games. But the problem is, it just doesn't seem like against competent teams. And I hate to say the Senators and the Habs aren't competent teams, but when they play against any rougher competition, they just can't seem to handle it. And, we saw the other night against the Blackhawks, they almost lost that game in Chicago. A wounded animal, the Blackhawks, who have not won a game, just fired their general manager and their president, and you had to take it to overtime, come back late in that game. Congrats to David Kampf, though, scoring that tying goal late in the third period to tie the game. But I don't know what to say about the Leafs anymore. This is a team that just, there's no excuse at this point. There's none. And we're just not seeing that compete level that's needed for the Leafs to do what they want to do, not only in the regular season, of course, but during the playoffs as well. They need to pick up their game. They need to get a little bit more physical. I mean, everybody says, oh, that game's going away. Yeah, but you need some sense of that. And the Leafs just get pushed around, and we're kind of seeing that right now. I don't know what to tell you with that. And then you got Marner, Tavares with 2 or 3, not even. I don't think Marner scored a goal yet. I mean, not good stuff in Toronto. At number 23, a little bit more positive. The Nashville Predators. Guys, they were in the bottom 5 last week in our power rankings, but the Preds have picked up 2 straight victories. And, yeah, they're ahead of the Maple Leafs. So, for Preds fans, there you go. You got something to hang your hat on. But with that said, this is a team that is still not in the best spot, but they've given themselves a chance to maybe give themselves, let's say if they do well this month and up until Thanksgiving, this team could be a playoff contender come, the beginning of 2022, and we're starting to talk about them being in the race. You just have to give yourself a chance, and I think UC Saros will be able to do that for the Predators, and now they've got 2 straight wins to prove that a little bit, so good stuff for the Preds. At number 22, we have the Boston Bruins. Yeah, they're not looking their best right now, currently on a 2-game losing skid. They haven't been their best selves either. This is a team that we know should be a good hockey team, but it seems like the goaltending is maybe a little bit more of a concern than we thought going into this year. It doesn't seem, Jeremy Swayman, again, it wasn't his fault, but there were a couple goals in that last game. Didn't play his best. The defense looked a little bit off. Everybody's saying this Boston, defense hasn't lost a beat since they've lost Krug and Chara. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. And we're starting to see that right now. So it's still early in the year. I do like the Bruins, but in this Atlantic Division, again, things have opened up a little bit because Tampa hasn't been their best and Toronto hasn't been their best. Boston needs to be taking advantage of that if they want to get into the playoffs this year. There's teams in that Atlantic Division that are ahead of them that probably shouldn't be. With that said, at number 21, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Kind of like the Boston Bruins. They looked pretty good out of the gate for the first couple of games, and now they're starting to regress a little bit. They've lost 2 straight now, have the Blue Jackets. I think they've lost 3 of 4 now. Things have kind of spiraled downward for this Jackets team. This is a team that you're going to need that goaltending because you have Korpisalo, you have Merzlikins. You just need to find a way to get more consistency from them. You need more consistent scoring from Patrick Laine. He can't just win these games in overtime. You need a little bit more from him, 5-on-5 and on the power play. I mean, he's a power play specialist, probably one of the best releases in the game. He's got to score some more goals for this Jackets team that is still rebuilding, for that matter, but they don't see themselves that way. You could tell the way they're treating this. They had a good record to start the year. It just seems like they've kind of lost a step, and things have kind of gone sideways since then. At number 20, speaking of things going sideways, perfect transition to the New Jersey Devils. Things, you kind of knew things could go bad when Blackwood and Hughes went on the injured reserve, but nobody knew it would maybe get this bad this quickly. Nico Dawes got pulled in that game against Calgary earlier this week. Really, that was kind of sad to see. His second NHL game getting pulled, gave up 4 goals in the first period, something like that. So, that's the kind of stuff. It's tough. It is. It's really tough, but you need to find a way to just grind out those games, and you can't do that if your goaltending's not there. And right now you've got Bernier, Wedgwood, and Nico Dawes. So we'll see what happens, but man, I'm just not really confident on New Jersey. They've lost that little bit of high and that little bit of confidence they had earlier in the year, that swagger. I don't know how they're going to get that back. Is it going to take Hughes and Blackwood to come back for them to get that? That might be what it is. At number 19, we have the Dallas Stars. They've also kind of slipped up a little bit. Last week they had some pretty quality wins toward the top of the NHL standings, but last week they kind of folded again. They've lost 2 of their past 3 games. They're just not really getting it done, and I think to some extent, it comes back to the goal scoring. They need depth goal scoring. But now we're starting to see the problem of they're not getting scoring from their top guys. And that's usually a strength for the Dallas Stars. You have Radulov, Ben, but you have Sagan, Radulov, those guys scoring goals. And then you have Jason Robertson being scratched at certain points earlier this year. Like, that stuff's not going to work for the Dallas Stars if they want to have success this year. So, listen, it's a long season. It's a grind. We're only 7 or 8 games in for most of these teams. But I'm not liking what I've seen from Dallas thus far. The goaltending has looked spotty. Like, that's the kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just, I wouldn't place bets on the Stars winning the Cup right now. But, again, we'll kind of see as things kind of play along. And number 17, a little bit more of a confident, a better looking outlook on this team. The Vegas Golden Knights at number 17, they were toward the bottom last week. They moved up 5 or 6 spots this week on a 2-game winning streak. Their last loss was against the New York Islanders when they came into town and got shut out last Sunday night at T-Mobile Arena. So, we're starting to see Vegas kind of turn the corner a little bit. This has been a bit of an adjustment for some of the young guys on this team, like Krabs, Patrick, Howden, who was hurt. There is just a lot of things going on in a very young team right now with, some leaders gone in Stone, in Patrick Reddy. Those guys being out of the lineup, Tuck. Those are some big holes to fill for this team. So it's going to take a little while. Get some NHL experience for the young guys, and we'll start to see this team turn around. I think we are going to see that. And again, in that Pacific Division, they kind of have the time because, this division is looking like the weakest division right now. And with that said, at number 16, kind of a similar situation. These guys were rivals last year in the West Division. That's the Colorado Avalanche. They've kind of picked themselves up a little bit. Their record still looks a little bit gaudy, but they're just finding ways to give themselves a chance in games. And, I think that's going to go a long way for this team. Kemper has taken a little while to acclimate, but that win in Tampa Bay last week I thought was going to be like their kind of turnaround moment, and it hasn't necessarily turned that way, but they have been able to pick up a couple of wins here, and I think it is starting to turn things around for them. At number 15, I've got the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Tampa Bay Lightning, this is a situation where you're seeing a lot of the young guys coming, kind of like Vegas, like we just talked about. The only problem is they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now, everything with Nikita Kucherov has been well explained and talked about, so that's going to be a long-term hindrance on this team. Vasi has looked good at times, but he's also looked a little bit, out of place in certain games and certain situations. So he needs to be a little bit more consistent if the Lightning want to move higher up into that top 10 criteria, because right now they're number 15, which is still good. Considering how they started, 15 is not bad. But if they want to get back into that top 10, they're gonna need more consistent goal scoring, maybe from some of the younger guys, and you're gonna need to see a little better goaltending. I think I love Vasi. He's a very good goaltender, probably one of the best in the NHL right now, but he needs to pick it up just a little bit. A little bit more consistency would go a long way for him. Just avoiding those weird, blooper goals that shouldn't go in. I think that's going to be key for the Lightning and for Vasilevsky's success this season. At number 14, I got to do it. Shaka, I know. Shout out to my guy Shaka, big Sharks fan. The Sharks are at 14 here. They fall out of the top 10. They were in it for 1 week, and they find themselves right back out of the top 10. Teams have gotten better, and the Sharks are on a 3-game losing skid. Ever since that game against the Montreal Canadiens, kind of was the pinpoint to that, just showing this team isn't where they want to be. This is what they did last season. They were really good on the road. They found ways to win games. The second they come home, all of a sudden they can't find a way to win. And we're seeing that right now from the Sharks. Again, there's still a lot of things that are positive for this team. But they need some more goal scoring from the top guys up front. And, in the beginning of the season, they had Brent Burns scoring goals, Carlson scoring goals, Mario Ferraro scoring goals. You can't rely on that all season. You need your big boys up front to score a little bit more. I think that'll make a world of a difference. The goaltending, looked a little more spotty this week. But there is still, again, the Sharks are at 14. If you told me in week 2 the Sharks were 14, I would believe it, but I would have expected them to be probably in the bottom half of the NHL standings and the bottom half of my power rankings. They do find themselves on the right side of the power rankings in the top 16. That means there you go. They're on the right side of things. And despite a 3-game losing streak, as long as they win a game or two this week, I think they will be just fine. At number 13, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Yeah, the Penguins starting to come into reality just a little bit. They've lost 2 straight. We're starting to see the COVID stuff kind of affect them a little bit. You know, you look at the center depth right now, it doesn't look pretty. You've got 3 guys gone that really are critical to your success. You have Crosby still out, Malkin still out, oh yeah, and Jeff Carter. All 3 of those guys out right now. Those are some key losses for this team, and again, it's not the end of the world. They still find themselves in the top 15, despite not having those 3 guys. But the goaltending is coming back to earth just a little bit, and we're starting to see the team slip up, and that's just kind of how this goes. So we'll see how long it takes the Penguins to get going again once those guys come back. But they're going to need those guys very, very soon. And let's be honest, especially Malkin and Crosby, they are absolutely going to want to be in the lineup soon because they want to play in the Olympics in February. So they're going to need to get some games under their belt if they want to do that. So with that said, at number 12, I know Penguins fans aren't going to like this, but number 12 is the New York Islanders. The Islanders have kind of turned everything around. I mean, they lose those first 2 games of the season, and now you look and you're like, what's going on there? All of a sudden, they're 3-2-1. They might be 4-2-1. Now that I think about it, they might be that good. Let me check. I'm going to get fact-checked if I don't check it myself. Yeah, they're 3-2-1. Sorokin's got back-to-back shutouts. He had a 900 plus save percentage in the 2 games prior to that. So the past 4 games, the Islanders have picked up a point in all 4 of those games, won 3 of those games, and Sorokin's got 2 straight shutouts. Correlation? Absolutely. Good goaltending gets you wins. And I'm going to talk about that in my video later tonight, which you guys will see. But that is the story right now of the New York Islanders, and we're kind of seeing that continue. And just like that, I was a little worried about my Islanders, but now they find themselves just on the outside of the top 10. Now, at number 11, I did like both of these teams. I kind of had them in the same category, these next 3 teams. It was the Islanders, the Winnipeg Jets, and somebody else, which I'll talk about at 10. The Winnipeg Jets are at 11. I'm wearing their jersey today. I mean, the way Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor and Kopp have stepped up with Wheeler and Scheifele out of the lineup has been really impressive. I really like what I've seen from the Jets. Connor Hellebuyck hasn't had to be his best self, but I talked about this last week with the Jets. They're able to outscore teams. They've basically done what the Leafs do, just like actually executing it and doing it well. And they're not paying the money that the Leafs are to their big boys. So, again, a little bit of a jab there at the Leafs, but give credit where it's due. Paul Maurice, who is usually a defensive-minded head coach, has kind of allowed the floodgates to open this year, and the Jets are finding success, and it's really some good stuff. Again, he was, complaining that some of the reads weren't great in their game against Anaheim earlier this week. He called them out, but they're on a 4-game winning streak. It's looking good for Winnipeg, despite coming out slow. I think they only played like 2 or 3 games in the first 2 weeks of the season. It was a slow start, hard for them to get into it, and now they're kind of rolling, and we're seeing the Jets. The expectations for them, in the beginning of the season, in the preseason, was they could be the best team in Canada. They're looking pretty close to that right now at number 11. At number 10, speaking of Canadian teams, where do these guys come from? They started the season 0-1-1, and the Calgary Flames have now ripped off 5 straight in a row. I don't know where to start with this. I mean, the Calgary Flames, they go on the East Coast road trip, which, there were a lot of undefeated teams there on the East Coast. You had New Jersey, who made them pull the goaltender. You had a couple games where you just won, and they looked good. I mean, they looked really good on that, that metropolitan road trip, East Coast road trip, whatever you want to call it. And here they are. They find themselves in the top 10. A team that was in the bottom 10 just last week as all of a sudden I've jumped on the bandwagon of the Calgary Flames, and how do you not? They have the third highest win streak right now in the league, other than the top two teams, which you could probably figure out who those teams are. But Calgary is right behind them with a 5-game winning streak. Gotta like what you see right now from Calgary, and they're starting to get things going. Again, kind of like Winnipeg, didn't play a lot of games to start this season, but here they go, and they are running away with it. So, good stuff from the Flames. At number 9, I was really expecting the Buffalo Sabres to fall off after that game against Boston. They lost that other game, and they didn't. They absolutely didn't. They are 5-1-1 right now. How is this happening? They've won they've gotten a point in 6 of their first 7 games to start the season without Jack Eichel, without Ristolainen, without Reinhart. This is where the Buffalo Sabres are at, ladies and gentlemen, and I was so reluctant to put them in the top 15. I even took a step further than that. I put them in the top 10. They are your number 9 team in our power rankings this week. So, listen, I'll give an applause to the Buffalo Sabres and their fans because they absolutely deserve this. Doesn't matter how long it's going to last. This could end next week, but for right now, this means the world to the Buffalo Sabres and that fan base. So, I am rooting for the Sabres right now. At number 8, man, the Minnesota Wild, the state of hockey, they started off really well. 5-game winning streak, and now they lost a game in overtime, lost a game in regulation. They're now 5-1-1. Same record as the Buffalo Sabres, I know. But Minnesota has looked okay, but they've slipped up just a little bit, so they didn't really move in our power rankings. Teams just moved up and down, and they kind of found themselves in the same spot. So that's where we're at with Minnesota. Again, there's nothing really bad with this team. I think their Cam Talbot has been great for them. You got the goal scoring. You're going to see the young guys pick it up a little bit more. I think Minnesota is destined to do great things this season. I was kind of, questioning that in the beginning of the year. They didn't have that second-line center, but it seems like they're doing okay without that. Joel Eriksson Ek, man, give him some credit. He has been really good for the Wild to start this year. And, as probably Bill Guerin would have told you, he'd say, I told you so. I knew he was going to be that good. He signed that big ticket this past summer. At number 7 here, we have the Rangers slipping out of the top 5 just barely. They slipped down 2 spots. And they're at number 7. I mean, the Rangers have looked good. They're not looking bad, I could tell you that. They're 4-2-1 on the season, and they find themselves in a wild card spot right now. You have, some other teams just ahead of them, which we're about to talk about in a second. But the Rangers find themselves in a great spot. 4-2-1 is not a bad record right now. Definitely could see improvement, but the way some of those young guys have developed, it's really looking good for the Rangers. Lafreniere's look good. Hito's look good. Keandre Miller's look good. Those are all key assets to this team if they want to have success this year. All right, let's keep going. So at number 6, guys, we're talking about the Philadelphia Flyers. The Philadelphia Flyers are at number 6. I'm pretty sure they were at 6 last week. I think they were just behind the Rangers. Now the Rangers have just fallen back behind them. But the Flyers, they've been doing their thing. And, right now they find themselves 3rd in the Metropolitan Division. They're 4-1-1 to start the year. I mean, they've looked good. They've done what they need to do. Martin Jones may take Carter Hart's spot as the, maybe not the starter, but as the 1A option. Maybe not full-on starter backup situation. But Martin Jones has, especially in that game the other night, he looked pretty good. So I'm expecting some good stuff here from the Flyers. Listen, we'll see how far it takes them, but you got to like what you've seen in terms of their record, in terms of goaltending, which is huge for them. Good stuff. And not to mention guys like Konechny having a nice bounce-back season. Oh, man. Konechny having a good start. Joel Farabee, kind of leading off of what he did last season. So, good stuff. At number 5, we're moving to the top 5. I know some of you were upset last week. Why wasn't St. Louis in the top 5? Well, there you go. They're in the top 5 right now. Well deserved. How much of this do you want to put on Vladimir Tarasenko? Because Tarasenko has been really good this year for the Blues. And, they lost last night. They're 5-1-0. But listen, I got to say, I love Jordan Binnington. And I know some people may not like what he did, almost hitting, who was that? I forgot who it was on the Avalanche with the stick. But he's just such a fiery guy. And, sometimes that can burn you, absolutely. But I like that from my goaltender. And right now, they're 5-1 on the season. They had a 5-game winning streak. It snapped last night, their first L of the season against the Avalanche, who they are looking a little bit intimidating. But the Blues right now at the top of the Central Division, they've looked great. And I think it was time for them to finally move up. I wasn't totally sold on them last week. Wasn't sold on them in the preseason. They're making me eat it a little bit here through the first really almost month of the season. So good stuff from the St. Louis Blues. They definitely deserved it. And now they find themselves at number 5. Now at number 4, we go back up north of the border. We got the Edmonton Oilers here. The Oilers are 5-1 to start the season. Despite losing Mike Smith to injury, the goaltending has kind of just kept pace and just been able to do what they have to do. And the Oilers stay in the top 5. They're number 4. I don't think they moved from last week. Actually, they moved down 1 because another team behind them last week moved up. But Edmonton is just... They just get the goals. They're kind of like Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg and Edmonton are really interesting teams. Obviously, the goaltending edge goes to the Jets right now with Hellebuck, but the way these two teams play, very fast pace, back and forth, move the tempo game, and they're finding success with that, and they're scoring enough goals, and they're just able to outscore their problems. Now, how long does that work in an 82-game schedule? I'd tell you the answer if I knew. I'm sure anybody would tell you the answer if they knew, but right now it's working, and that's all you could ask for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, at number 3, we've got the Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals, they have yet to lose in regulation. Now, they have picked up a couple of L's along the way. They're 4-0-3, but they have 11 points, and they sit second in the Metropolitan Division behind the team I'll talk about next. You could probably figure that one out. But they've been able to get the job done. And Vitek Vanecek looked a little shaky in some of those losses. But this is a team that's just finding ways to win, finding ways to pick up points, no matter how ugly it looks. Hendrix Lapierre was a great little bit of energy into this team. So I really like what the Capitals have done. And we're seeing TJ Oshie play well. Had a hat trick the other night. Shout out to him. Ovechkin scoring, Kuznetsov scoring. What more could you ask for the Washington Capitals? And Samsonov has been good. So as long as Vanecek can get back on his game as the kind of the backup, that would make a world of a difference for the Washington Capitals. But listen, it's hard to critique when you're number 3 in goal line hockey power rankings and you haven't lost in regulation yet. Your record is really good. So we'll leave it at that for the Capitals. At number 2, this is the best team in the Metropolitan Division as of right now. They are one of only 2 teams to be completely undefeated this season. And you could assume the number 1 team is the higher end undefeated team. But the Carolina Hurricanes are 6-0 right now. They have a plus 17 goal differential. Let me say that again. They have a plus 17 goal differential through the first 6 games of the year, which means at this rate, they're pretty much over. They're outscoring their opponents 3-1 at that point, which is really good. Maybe even 4-1. Like that is how good they have been to start the year. So, congrats to the Carolina Hurricanes. Freddie Anderson has looked good. He beat the Leafs in his first game against them this week. So you're just seeing stuff like that. They beat Montreal because of the whole thing with Kakanyemi. You gotta love what you've seen from the Hurricanes so far. They're playing with meaning in some of these games, like the games against Montreal and Toronto. So it's really nice to see the Hurricanes just continuing to win hockey games. They have really nice uniforms, so they're doing it in style. Listen, I don't like the way they beat up on my Islanders in the first game of the year, but you can't deny the hustle. You absolutely cannot. At number 1. Now, this team's interesting because over the last, 48 hours, a lot has changed for the Florida Panthers. But right now, they are 7-0. There are only 7 other teams, they are the 7th team in NHL history to go 7-0 to start a season. The first in Panthers history. So the Florida Panthers right now, there is a lot of shakeup all of a sudden. This situation in Chicago has kind of leaked into the Sunrise State, as Joel Quenneville has resigned, or he would have been fired, but he resigned as head coach of the Florida Panthers, which means we're going to see Coach Brunette, as the interim tag, take on the Florida Panthers. They may be looking at another head coach, which I've talked about in other videos, potentially John Tortorella. That would be interesting. But the Florida Panthers, they've got a really good roster, but how much of it is, we're going to see how much of it was Joel Quenneville and how much is it just the guys and the chemistry in the room, the goaltending from Bobrovsky. That shouldn't change, and I think, for the Florida Panthers, maybe that new voice throws things off a little bit. I think it's important they win the next 2 games. If they can win this back-to-back Friday and Saturday, and they go 9-0, I know it's asking for a lot, but then you have 5 days off until next week you play your next game. The Florida Panthers have enough time to figure out their situation, get used to this new voice in the room, and kind of get things going really in the direction that they want. And they could be a real terror in that Eastern Conference this year, as if they haven't been already. So, guys, that is it for our power rankings. Make sure to check it out here throughout the video. I'll probably have it playing throughout the video so you guys can just take a look at the chart this week. Like I said, a couple of pretty interesting teams moving up, a couple teams moving down. I mean, really 3 teams in particular I really liked. The Calgary Flames, the Jets, and the Islanders. All 3 of those teams bunched up between 10, 11, and 12. Currently on point streaks right now, at the very least 4 for the Islanders and the Jets, and 5 wins in a row for the Flames. The Sharks regressed a little. They're on a 3-game losing streak. The Ducks on a 5-game losing streak. So we're starting to see things even out just a little bit more. I'm going to be interested really this week to see what happens with teams like Colorado, Vegas, and Tampa, because they're supposed to be at the topper echelon of the NHL, and they find themselves all together right in the middle at 15, 16, and 17. So as we saw those 3 teams I mentioned earlier moving up, will we see these 3 teams be the next big movers next week? We'll have to wait and see. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Guys, we do a power rankings. It's normally every Saturday night, but we got a lot going on this weekend for Halloween, so we pulled it out for you here this Friday night. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next Saturday night. Happy Halloween, guys. I will see you later.